Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Libby, and we also have Nikki here, who will be presenting with me this afternoon. We both work in MPI's Exporter Regulatory Advice Service, or more commonly known as ERAS, and this session is the third webinar in ERAS's Exporting 101 webinar series that we're currently hosting. So a warm welcome back to those in our audience who we've seen before, and also welcome to those new faces as well. Thank you again, for joining us for this session. So for many of you in the audience, this will now be a familiar picture. So we at ERAS like to think and talk about exporting as a journey, and what we're talking about today is right at the end of this journey. But being eligible for certification for some products often begins much earlier in the exporting journey. And so while certification is not required for every product to every market, it is important to determine if you will need it as we think about getting ready, export ready. So what is an export certificate? So an export certificate, or it can be known as an official assurance, is a document that provides an importing country with confirmation from MPI that your products meet certain known standards and requirements. And so today we're going to talk about how you find out if you need certification issued by MPI, and if you do, how you get it. We will focus on plants, wine and processed foods, and we're going to include some information on organic certification and how this works in addition to the other certificates. And we will also briefly touch on certificates of origin, which although not issued by MPI, we wanted to flag with you today because they are really good to be aware of. A very quick point of note is there are associated costs with obtaining certification, but we won't be getting into that detail today in this presentation. So MPI's role in certification. We've previously talked about MPI's role in exporting, but specifically what's our role in certification? So from our 101 session, we know that the Ministry for Primary Industries is responsible for ensuring that our primary industry export products meet export requirements and are fit for their intended use. So export certificates are issued by MPI to give official government-to-government assurance about products exported from New Zealand to this end. So essentially, they're issued by us when we're satisfied that your product complies with the relevant regulations and requirements. And some of the statements that we are certifying against are things like the country of origin of the product and its ingredients, perhaps, the treatments or other processes that the product may have undergone prior to export, and statements around the product's health status. For example, whether a certain animal or plant disease is present in New Zealand. So turning first to plant products, export certification for plant products are called phytosanitary certificates. Some people you'll hear people call them phytocerts or phytos, but yeah, the long formal name is phytosanitary certificate. And a phytocert confirms the importing country's phytosanitary requirements are met and provides MPI's certifying statements that the consignment is considered free from pests of concern for that country and practically free from other pests. So there are three types of phytosanitary certificates the MPI issues. These are a standard phytosanitary certificate, a re-export phytosanitary certificate, and something called a seed varietal certificate. So to find out if you need a phytosanitary certificate, there are documents called importing countries' phytosanitary requirements, or more commonly known as ICPRs. And they summarise the importing country's phytosanitary requirements for both plant and forestry products. So if you're familiar with OMAs, or Overseas Market Access Requirements, you can sort of think of these as equivalent for plant products. However, unlike animal product OMAs, the ICPRs don't require a password to view them. They are available on the MPI website. So the ICPRs are documents that MPI publishes to help exporters to find and meet those importing requirements. And these requirements are based on legislation, regulation and clarification from the importing countries themselves. And so they'll normally outline whether you will need something called an import permit and or a phytosanitary certificate, as well as any other information that should also be included on a certificate if you need one. So sometimes your product isn't in the ICPR, or there is no ICPR listed for your country. And in these cases, you'll need to talk to either the local authority in the importing country or work closely with an importer or an agent to get an import permit. And then an import permit would then determine whether you need a phytosanitary certificate. So how do you get an efido if you need one? So the certificates are applied for through a system called the efido system. And the efido system is an online platform that was developed by MPI to electronically manage the certification process. And so a bit of an overview of that process. Firstly, a requester, so this could be an exporter or another organisation, raises a request within efido for a certificate. And this request needs to include all of the supporting documentation around the product's compliance to the requirements that apply to it. This can include something called a declaration of conformity or a DOC. And it will also include the import permit when relevant. Then secondly, the requester's nominated independent verification agency, or their IVA, will then verify that the conditions for the export to that country have been met against the import permit, the ICPR, or the DOC. And then finally, the certificate can then be printed by either MPI's certification unit, the IVA, or an MPI approved organisation. So some differences in the process to be aware of for phytos are certificates for consignments to France, Spain and Mexico need to be physically signed by the competent authority, so by MPI after they've been printed. And then for all other destination markets, the certificate can be printed having already been electronically signed by MPI. So that's a key difference to keep in mind. And our team is actually currently working on developing some educational training type resources around using efido. So if this is relevant to your business, look out for those. Nikki is now going to talk to us about certification for wine. Take it away, Nikki.
Thanks, Libby. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about fruit wine, cider, mead wine products and non-New Zealand grape wine and the difference between that process and New Zealand grape wine. So when you're exporting fruit wine, cider, mead wine products and non-New Zealand grape wine, MPI doesn't have any export certification requirements. And to date, no destination countries have required an official assurance for any of these products. However, some export markets may seek a free sale certificate to confirm that a product complies with New Zealand standards. So the process for exporting New Zealand grape wine is different. So there's several steps that you'll need to do just to ensure that your wine is eligible for export. So I'm just going to go over those now. So you'll want to firstly ensure that your wine meets export eligibility requirements. So all wine for export must be made and packaged under a registered wine standards management plan. You can apply for your batches to be assessed for export eligibility. Each batch assessment can be done. You can apply for this using wine esearch, which I'm going to talk about a bit in the next slide. There's testing, so 2 samples from each batch of wine must be submitted to the Wine Export Certification Service. This is for sensory testing. And then once your wine has been assessed and confirmed as eligible for export, you can include it in a consignment application. This is also using wine esearch. So only wine listed on the export eligibility statement can be exported, so please ensure that you're loading the correct wine when you load for your export. So the documentation that you might need would be your export eligibility statement and an official assurance if one is required for the country that you're exporting to. So getting your export eligibility statement, when we approve your request, an export eligibility statement will be emailed to you. So this information is also required to complete the New Zealand Customs export entry. So a copy is also available for you to download in Wine esearch. If you're exporting someone else's wine, they'll need to apply for an export eligibility statement on your behalf. So you'll just need to get in contact with the person who's supplying you the wine. So getting an official assurance, as part of your application for batch eligibility, you'll need to make declarations for each batch of wine to show that your wine meets any relevant OMAs or official market access requirements. If you're exporting to a country that requires an official assurance, this will automatically be generated as part of your consignment approval request. So a printed copy of this document will be sent out. And there's a guide in Wine esearch if you want a bit more information about this. It's called Creating a Consignment Request and Obtaining Export Documentation. So that's just a wee guide in Wine esearch to help you out. So if you need any additional documentation, such as a free sale certificate or a free sale advice statement, these must be requested separately. So just a bit about Wine esearch now. So it's just a system that MPI uses to track wine batches for export, establish whether wine batches are eligible for export, and produce export documentation. So if you're a wine producer, bottler, or an exporter with your own wine brand, you need access to Wine esearch so that you can apply for approval for export when you're exporting New Zealand grape wine. And then if you're a contract winemaker, you'll need to access Wine esearch so that you can confirm the winemaking details for your clients. Before you can use Wine esearch, you must be set up as a user. So you can request access to Wine esearch in 3 steps. So firstly, you'll want to register your business and users for Wine esearch access. Then you'll need to create a RealMe account because logging in to Wine esearch is done with a RealMe account. If you already have an existing account, you can use this to log into Wine esearch, but if you don't, you'll just need to make a new one. And then lastly, when you access Wine esearch for the first time using your RealMe account, you'll need to provide an MPI activation key. MPI will email you one when your Wine esearch registration is processed. Okay, now we're going to talk about organics. So the term organic is used for products that are made or grown according to organic production standards and that have been certified by a reputable independent organic certification agency. So not all organic certification bodies can certify your products to all overseas organic standards. So it's important to remember that your products must be legal before they can be organic. So exported organic products must meet both the general food regulatory requirements, such as labelling or composition for their product type in the importing market, and they also have to meet the relevant consumer protection legislation in the destination market for you to market your product as organic. For example, if you export organic wine, you also need to meet all requirements for conventional wine, whether New Zealand grape wine or fruit wine. Then next, you'd need to make sure your wine is certified to the right organic standard and that it's acceptable in the market or markets that you want to export to. So different standards and regulations apply in different markets for certifying products as organic. So I'm just going to talk now about the OOAP, or Official Organic Assurance Program. So this was established in 2001 by MPI. The first market access arrangement was with the EU. This was followed by the US, Switzerland, Japan, Taiwan, and the UK, including Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So products exported to these markets must have been produced and processed by operators participating in the OOAP. Exporters must also be certified by a recognised agency, or also known as an RA, and are registered with MPI. So there's 2 agencies recognised by MPI to do this, Assure Quality and BioGrow New Zealand Limited. So if you're exporting to a market where New Zealand has secured a government-to-government agreement, products certified under the OOAP will be eligible for an official organic assurance. This is an organic export certificate issued by MPI to prove that your products are certified to the right organic standard. If you're exporting to markets not covered by the OOAP, then you'll need to find out what those organic requirements are. So the Organic Exporters Association can help you find out what these are. So you can either Google Organic Trade NZ, or you can find them at organictradenz.com. So for each market, there is an organic export requirement, overseas market access requirement. This is a special organic OMA. So the OMA will spell out everything you need to know for exporting to that market, including instructions on getting an export certificate. So not all products can be marketed as organic in every market. So please check the OMA carefully because it will state what you're allowed to market as organic. Exporters must also be registered directly with MPI as an organic exporter. Only registered organic exporters with MPI can request official organic assurances for organic consignment. So that's a really important step. So now we're just going to talk a bit about free sale certificates and free sale statements. So if you're exporting food products manufactured in New Zealand, you may need a free sale certificate or free sale statement to facilitate trade to some overseas markets. If the food contains a significant amount of animal product ingredients, such as meat, dairy, or honey, you may need other certification. So make sure you check the overseas market access requirements or OMA for the relevant country that you want to export to, just so you can find out if a certificate is required. But if you're exporting food or food-related products, the importer in your destination market will be able to tell you if you require a free sale certificate. So if you're applying for a free sale certificate or a free sale statement for the first time, you must register as a client with the Ministry for Primary Industries. And then you can complete a Cert 1 form and email it to the address on the registration form. You can email that together with your free sale statement or free sale certificate application, so you can do them both at the same time. So when you get a free sale certificate, this is issued for food manufactured in New Zealand, and it helps with the clearance of your consignment in foreign markets that require a statement about the food safety and suitability. To apply for a free sale certificate for food exports, you can use the Cert 2 form available on our website. You'll also need to get a manufacturer's declaration form from your manufacturer, confirming that the product meets all applicable standards for food safety and suitability. So you can ask the manufacturer to complete a Cert 3 form. This is also available on our website, and you can get them to email it to you, and then you can use this when you apply for your free sales certificate. For grape wine exports, you'll need to apply for a free sale certificate through Wine esearch, just because that process is a little bit different. And so for free sales statements, these are also issued for food manufactured in New Zealand. The difference is that this helps with a product's registration in a foreign market before its first entry. So to apply for a free sales statement, you can use the Cert 4 form, also available on our website, and as well as with the free sales certificate for grape wine exports, you'll need to apply for the free sales statement through Wine esearch also. So just note that all the cert forms mentioned today that I've just mentioned here in this slide are found on the free sales certificate and free sales statement section on our website. There's just a page there with instructions and links to the forms. Okay, I'll just pass it over to Libby and she's going to continue.
Brilliant, thanks Nikki. Yeah, so we did also only briefly want to mention certification for animal products today. Often certification for animal products is somewhat confusingly referred to as a couple of different names: health certificates, veterinary certificates, export certificates, and official assurance. So to find out if you need official assurance for a consignment of animal products, you need to refer to the relevant market's overseas market access requirement, or OMA. So if you attended our last webinar, you'll be familiar with OMAs, of course, and if you didn't, we will be making a recording of the session available online shortly. So certification for animal products is entirely managed through another electronic platform called esearch. esearch is quite a large topic, and so we've actually decided to host a bit of a bonus webinar in 2 weeks' time, just focused on esearch. So I'll say no more today, but I do encourage you to attend that session if it's relevant to your business. Great. And finally today, we come to certificates of origin. So certificates of origin, or COs, are issued by accredited New Zealand chambers of commerce. They're often requested by importers, and so we did feel it was important to include them in this session. So these certificates certify the place of growth, production or manufacture of goods exported from New Zealand. Only goods produced in New Zealand will be issued a CO of New Zealand, of course, but there are alternative certifications that exist for goods that were produced elsewhere. So COs are issued online or manually. Most markets now accept electronically certified COs, but where a manual certificate is required by a market, this can be known as a wet stamp certificate. In these cases, the certificate will need to be collected, or it can be couriered to you as well. So for more information on this type of certificate, you can see the export documentation section of the New Zealand Chambers of Commerce website. So yeah, if you have an importer ask you about that, that's where you can turn to for some support. Great, next slide, Nikki. So finally, we have arrived really at the end of our presentation, and so we did want to take the opportunity to summarise the key messages, the things that we really hope you take away from today's session, if nothing else. And the first of those is to know that certification is only one element of being export ready, and it's often dependent on decisions that you make earlier in your exporting journey. So if you'd like an overview of exporting and missed our first two webinars, like I say, we are going to make recordings of those available online soon, and we encourage you to watch those. Secondly, where you check if you need a certificate, which one you need and how you get it varies considerably, obviously, depending on your product, so that's good to keep in mind. And also importantly, certificates, generally speaking, can't be issued retrospectively, and so it is important to know if you need one early on and ensure that your supply chain maintains export certification eligibility if you do. And again, depending on your product, you could need more than one type of certification. So for example, as Nikki was explaining to us around organic products, or if your product contains multiple ingredients, sometimes you'll need multiple certificates. And finally, come to MPI early, come to us early. eRaise is absolutely here to help with any and all questions.
Right, thanks everyone for joining today.
Yeah, thank you again.
Hopefully see you at the next one.
Cool. Thanks guys. See you later.